Hi, friends. It's Tim Villegas. This is Think Inclusive. In today's episode of Think Inclusive, we have the pleasure of speaking with two remarkable advocates for inclusion. First, we welcome Brilly Semenova, a passionate advocate who has been dedicated to supporting individuals with disabilities since her middle school days. Brilli shares her journey of creating mentorship programs and providing resources to families, emphasizing the importance of self-advocacy and inclusive practices in education and beyond. Next, we are joined by Nisha Batra, an early childhood educator from Toronto, who brings her lived experience with a learning disability to the forefront of her advocacy. Nisha discusses the significance of celebrating diversity and normalizing differences in the classroom, offering valuable insights on how educators can create truly inclusive environments. Together, Brilli and Nisha's stories highlight the transformative power of inclusion and the ongoing efforts needed to ensure that every student feels valued and supported. Thanks so much for being here with us today. We appreciate each and every one of you listening to or watching Think Inclusive, MCIE's podcast that brings you conversations with people doing the work of inclusion in the real world. And while you're here, make sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you are so you can keep getting Think Inclusive in your feed. Before we get into my conversation with Brilli and Nisha, I want to tell you about our sponsor for this season, IXL. IXL is a fantastic all-in-one platform designed for K-12 education. It helps boost student achievement, empowers teachers, and tracks progress seamlessly. Imagine having a tool that simplifies what usually requires dozens of different resources. Well, that's IXL. As students practice, IXL adapts to their individual needs, ensuring they're both supported and challenged. Plus, each learner receives a personalized learning plan to effectively address any knowledge gaps. Interested in learning more? Visit ixl.com/inclusive. That's ixl.com/inclusive. All right, after a short break, we'll get into my conversation with Brilly Semenova and Nisha Batra. Catch you on the other side. Brilly Semenova, welcome to the Think Inclusive podcast.
Thank you for having me, team. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast today.
Brilli, will you remind me where you are in the world?
I am in Maryland, based in the Baltimore area, but I serve families and individuals all throughout the United States, providing resources, support, whether it's education, whether it's helping families understand what resources are available to their child or an adult with disabilities and without disabilities. So I'm like a one-stop shop for the individuals and their families.
How did you get into this work?
I started this when I was in middle school, going into high school. Even as a young child, I was very involved in after-school activities, and I was getting myself involved with activities that pertain to helping and serving others. So when I noticed what was happening in our educational system and society, I wanted to do something that will make a meaningful difference to help others. So I started developing projects and activities that will shine the light of letting those individuals with different abilities understand that they too can contribute to our society by making a difference. Even if it's volunteering for an hour, even if it's doing a story time, giving them the opportunities that will allow them to see their abilities to serve the community. So I started this from middle school.
And did you notice that your peers or yourself felt like you didn't have an opportunity to give back in that way?
So for me, for instance, I am always a very dedicated, passionate, optimistic, positive individual. I will not let any circumstances, whether it's physical limitation, whatever the circumstances may be, stop me. I would turn the word no to a yes, even if it takes multiple attempts or trials. Also, for me, growing up as an individual with a physical limitation, I knew firsthand what are some of the difficulties that these kids or these individuals are facing when they don't have the tools or the supports that they need to advocate for themselves. So I figured if I am struggling from a physical standpoint, trying to navigate this maze and trying to obtain the services from a physical standpoint, I can only imagine what it goes for other people. So I was like basically a leader that always started different projects that makes a difference, if
Mm,
that makes sense.
yeah. In your experience and when you started, because it's you started in middle school, so it sounds like you've always really been passionate and
Yes.
wanted to be a leader in this space. Where do you feel like the biggest challenge was for people as far as being self advocates? Like where did you like where did you focus?
The biggest challenge that I found for me is that there was no mentor. There was no programs that were available to young individuals to help them see the path, to guide them. Like there, yes, we have guidance counselors, and we still do today. We have social workers, but there was no programs in schools that provided mentorship, that provided guidance to help students see their path. We're missing that mentorship, that guidance, that advocacy opportunity. And we're still struggling with it today. But back then, 20 years ago, there was no mentorship program in schools or after schools. So I had to take the initiative upon myself to start something like this.
Do you have an example that you could share of what that looked like when you started?
Yes, absolutely. So there was a day where I was staying after school doing an activity, and when the activity was, finishing up, I was walking in the hallway and trying to get to my next destination, and I noticed a student sitting in the hallway, kind of being lonely, and something told me in my mind that something is not right, and I walked over to that student even though I was running behind and I needed to get to my next destination. And I started asking the students if they were okay. And they're like, yeah, I'm just waiting. But something kept telling me that the student was not having a good day. So I stayed with the student and started talking. And I was like, hey, my name is Brilli. This is what I do. What classes are you teaching? This was the first time I see you in the hallway, and normally I know all the students. And she was like, well, I don't really talk to many people because I have difficulty with socializing. I'm trying to find activity, and there seems to be no help. And as we were talking, her mom stopped by. She was like, oh my God, I finally see my child talking to someone, to more to her peers. I said, hi, my name is Brilli. She was just telling me that she's trying to join some activities, and I was telling her about some of the clubs that I was doing and see if she would be interested. As we were starting to talk, the mother started to explain to me that she was trying to navigate getting some services, but she doesn't know where to start. So I explained to the mom, here's what I do. I can maybe sit down with them after school one day and explain what resources are out in the community, and then they can explore depending on their needs and interests and the individual, situation. They can reach out to these contacts and see if they would be in a position to help them. And the mom was very appreciative. I didn't know that that one connection would get my name out in the community, and I wasn't doing this for recognition at no way. I was just giving something that I knew that I believed as giving back to the community because I would want someone to do the same thing for me. And after a few months of, after meeting with me, after getting the mom the guidance, she was able to get the necessary services for her child within 6 months. And then she started giving my name out to all of her contacts in the community and all of her, other parents. And this is how it really started, you know, to helping them, to help the individual see the light after the tunnel, and see their potential.
Mhm.
But I was not doing this for no recognition, if that explains.
Yeah, you were just trying to be a good person. Can we talk about your name for a second? I don't remember if I asked you about this before. So
Okay?
you go by Brilli, yes, but is your
My full
name?
name is Brilliant, but I go by Brilli because it's easier for people to make it short it's easier for people to pronounce it because a lot of times people ask, Brilliant is your name? I'm like, yeah. So people have a hard time believing that that's my name.
Yeah.
So I changed it to Brilli so it's easier, so there's no questions or no confusion.
That I don't think I've ever met a brilliant. Oh,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
thank you.
It's a no, it's unique. It's a very unique name. May I ask if, and it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, what inspired the name? Do you know the story of that?
Yes. So I was named after my grandmother that I did not get to meet because when I was born, she already passed away. So I was named after my grandmother.
Oh, so your grandmother was named Brilliant.
Yes. And
Wow.
in some family traditions, they give their
Yeah.
grandparents names.
Oh, wow. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I was curious about that.
Yeah.
Tell the listeners a little bit about what your advocacy looks like right now. So you said,
Yes. Absolutely.
yeah, you said how it started. So where are you now, and what are your kind of goals for advocacy right now?
Okay. So my advocacy is very unique. I help individuals, children, and adults. I'm probably the only advocate that you had an opportunity to meet over your time in doing these podcasts. I focus on education. I focus on employment. I focus on social skills. I focus on resources. I focus on government benefits. And let me clarify what I mean by government benefits. Social Security, SSI and SSDI, Medicaid, like helping families understand that there is coverage for medical assistance, Medicare, and also helping families understand the legal system. What happens if they have a child who cannot make decisions for themselves before they exit the school system, whether they need supporting decision making, guardianship, power of attorney for financial and medical, whatever the case will be. I basically give the families the resources that will connect them to the right people to understand what path to go if they have a child with minor or complex medical needs and really understand the difference between a guardianship and supporting decision making. Because for so many families, it's like a second language. A lot of families don't understand. Once you take your child's rights away, there's no way of going back. I explain about what happens when you are disabled and reach out to work and how it impacts your benefits. I also explain about the accessibility features, what to look for when you're getting hired in on the job and you need accommodation. I also do public speaking engagements and I work with post-secondary education students to help them understand what services are available to them when they exit high school because that IEP or 504 is no longer relevant when you go to post-secondary education. So I do a little bit of everything. And even though I'm based in one particular area, I serve families virtually and in person nationwide. So I have families that you are coming from different locations. Services may be different from state to state, but I'm still able to guide them to understand what resources may be available to them in the community based on their child's situation and their particular family situation or financial standpoint. Because not everybody knows what they're entitled to, and not everyone has the ability to hire an attorney for their child with a physical or intellectual disability when there's a discrimination or something going on, whether it's for educational purposes, whatever the case will be. A lot of families do not know what their rights are.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
therefore, a lot of students just continue to struggle and not be that voice for themselves. And in some cases, end up getting bullied by their peers because they don't know what they don't know, or they don't know how to navigate the maze in the school system to request the services that they're entitled to as a result of their situation.
A lot of people that listen to this podcast are interested in inclusive education and inclusive practices, particularly families who are advocating for their children to be fully included in general education settings.
Absolutely.
Do you have a story or any success
Sure.
stories that are related to inclusion?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I go out in the schools, I go out to different organizations. I'm a believer that a student can accomplish anything they put their mind to, regardless of their circumstances. So I'm always about keeping the student in their inclusive classrooms. Do not separate them, put them in self-contained or special ed. Every situation is unique. So I would always go in and I would provide tips and resources to the teachers, regardless if the student is having a behavior issue, because we don't know if the student is developing that behavior issue to excuse themselves from the curriculum. We don't know if the student is trying to express their emotions, and that's how they're expressing it by acting out with these behaviors. So I would go in to the classrooms and I would provide the resources that they would need to support the student within that classroom. And then at the same time, I would also observe and get to know the student, because I found that the student will open up easier to someone who is with their same interests and abilities and can relate to them. And I start to engage in conversations, and then I would develop a plan, a temporarily plan that the students and the teachers could use before they have an IEP meeting to discuss plan A versus plan B, and then implement in the IEP meeting, but do not separate them into like special classrooms unless you really, really have to. I'm all about inclusive and creating programs because we are all able to contribute to our society one way or another. We all bring unique activities, unique stories. So I'm always looking at ways to develop new projects, new activities.
So it sounds like you not only do you go to IEP meetings and consult with families, but you also consult with school districts as well.
Absolutely. I
Fantastic.
consult with school districts, for-profit, non-profit. I'm all about how do we develop this project? What do we need to bring to the schools in terms of funding to bring the new project to the table, whether it's digital or hard copy, to bring new ideas to engage our students.
What are some projects, if you're able to say, or what are some things right now that you're working on without divulging any sort of personal information?
Sure. So right when the pandemic hit, well, in December 2020, I um I was contacted by a career professional. He works with high school students to help them, you know, go to the next level, whether it's post-secondary education or career or whatever. He was looking for students. And my name was given to him. As we were starting to talk, he couldn't believe that this is happening in the society for individuals with disabilities, visible or invisible. And then he was working with a student who wanted to go for secondary education. As I started to explain the accommodation piece to him and the student's mom, he's like, wow, this is a whole different thing. We started talking. I said, he's like, how do we change it? I said, well, in order to change that, we need to start a nonprofit. So the more and more we talked about it, we started thinking on developing a program, and we started a nonprofit where it's called Helpopedia. And the purpose of this nonprofit is to help anybody at any given point of their specific situation. We have financial planners, we have mental health professionals, we have career planners. Anything that you need is at your fingertips. We're all nationwide. It's all available virtually, and families and students can schedule individual appointments with those professionals that they desire to talk to. We just started a new internship opportunity for our young students where they are being taught how to be a leader, get involved, or get to observe an individual on the job that they would want to have in their future career. So we're connecting them to people. We're giving them opportunities to do things that they may not have had an opportunity before, and everything is provided virtually. So it's a very unique way, not only for the students, but also other communities, other partners to get involved, because it's all about serving you, inclusiveness. Again, disabled or non-disabled, anybody can access it, and it's all about helping society.
Yeah.
And it improves the individuals with increase their abilities to improve their mental health status. Because as COVID hit, a lot of kids are struggling with their mental health and the whole socialization, but accessing this service allows these young individuals to socialize not only with their peers but other professionals in the field that they may want to choose in the future.
Can you name the nonprofit name again?
Yes, it's called Helpopedia, like Wikipedia.
Helpopedia.
Yes, and it's based in New York, but we serve everybody nationwide.
Are you on the web?
So they are on the website, but I'm all behind the scenes.
Okay. And where can people find more information about you? Do you have a website?
I do not have the website, but people are more than welcome to contact me by email or by phone. They can reach me at 443-650-3999, or they can email me BRILLY, the number 28 at gmail.com. So it's my name, the number 28 at gmail.com.
Okay. Yes. So we'll make sure to put that, your number and email, contact information. And I think that you have a LinkedIn page too. So
yes, I'm also on LinkedIn. So people are always welcome to reach out there as well. But if they want to reach out to me directly, whether they want me to do a public speaking engagement for a school or for an organization, I'm more than happy to do that. They can reach out directly, and I would be happy to assist them to the best of my ability.
Brilly Semenova, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and looking forward to educators and families connecting with you.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to connecting with you soon in the future.
Nisha Batra, thank you for being on the Think Inclusive podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Nisha, tell me a little bit about yourself. I know that you're an early childhood educator and you live in Canada, but just tell me and our audience a little bit about you.
My name is Nisha Batra, as Tim said. I am from Toronto, Ontario in Canada. I am an early childhood educator, so that means I work with the youngest age group in school. I work with the kindergarten students ranging from 3.5 all the way up to 6 years old, which you can imagine is a wide developmental age span. I am also a big disability advocate. That's part of the reason why I chose to be on Tim's podcast, because I really believe in inclusion of all children. And I myself have a learning disability. So I have such vast lived experience of inclusion throughout different stages of my life. And this being Learning Disabilities Awareness Month, this is a time where I particularly enjoy getting various opportunities to come on and to share my story.
Tell me more about you experiencing inclusion for yourself. Can you give us an example?
Sure. So, as mentioned, I have a learning disability, so life has had its challenges. I would say being included. So, let me backtrack. I have a learning disability, which is an umbrella term, which I came to realize as an adult. And my specific type of learning disability is a non-verbal learning disability. And one of the things that I've struggled with is in the social emotional aspect. Having a learning disability encompasses many things that you can't see. And I think there's such a misconception. People think, oh, you don't have a disability because it's not like I'm using a wheelchair or a cane, or it's physically obvious in some sense that I am different. But I do have my challenges. So as I said, I've struggled with building friendships. Being in school was very challenging throughout, all the way from childhood, even up to university. Building and sustaining friendships with people was one of the hardest things because I wanted people to understand who I was and treat me like they would treat everyone else. But because I was different, I always felt like I was on the outside looking in and I didn't know how I could get included. I would do a lot of things, especially when I was younger. I would seek attention because I wanted to feel included.
Okay. We have a lot of educators that listen to this podcast. I'm thinking, you said you did a few things to get attention and you wanted to feel like you included and you belonged. Do you have any advice for educators who may want to include students in their classrooms?
I think it's very important to understand your children, the needs of your children in the classroom. It's also very important to celebrate difference and diversity in the classroom, because I think that in itself sends a message that you are an inclusive environment. And inclusion doesn't necessarily, let's go back to the term inclusion. It doesn't necessarily even mean just disability related. It is cultural, cultural inclusion. It is so many socioeconomic factors, and that all children feel like, when I think of inclusion, I feel that all children have the right to belong in the classroom. And I really think that we, myself as an educator and educators in general, we need to normalize difference. We need to normalize and celebrate difference by reading more books of diverse nature in the classroom. We need to welcome home languages into the classroom. We need to make sure that we are welcoming families into the classroom, because we want children to feel like they belong in the classroom. We also want to recognize that there are different abilities in the classroom, and we don't want to single children out. We want them to be celebrated as part of the classroom as a whole. And I think that is so important. And again, I go back to reading books, experiences. Those inclusive experiences are very valuable. Like, I worked at a summer program this summer, and I was able to bring in someone who has a guide dog, someone who is blind, to show the children that we all in society, we all have different abilities. We do things differently, and that, having someone right there who is showing them how they use their white cane to get around, how their guide dog helps them get around, that really broadens a child's understanding of the world. I think experiences are so critical, and I think diverse material in the classroom also are critical. And showing that, I was thinking about this yesterday. I think about it in schools where there are diagnostic kindergarten, for example, there may be a special education classroom or a diagnostic kindergarten classroom where children are separated from the mainstream classroom because they can't handle it. But why can't we bridge those classrooms together? Why can't we have days, for example, where kids from a regular classroom have the opportunity to interact with the children who cannot come to the regular classroom? Why can't they go visit that classroom and learn about what the other children are experiencing? Because I feel that if we don't bring children together and we segregate classrooms, how is that an example of inclusion?
Have you experienced that as an educator, like a truly inclusive early childhood system? I know that there are some in the United States. I don't know what the education system is like in Canada, specifically Ontario. Is it still very common for early childhood classrooms in Ontario to be like segregated like that, but where there's a quote unquote special education classroom and then a regular classroom?
So from my experience in the school that I work in, we are one teacher and one early childhood educator. As you could imagine, in kindergarten with classes averaging around 25 students, and you do definitely have students with special needs, but we do also have something called diagnostic kindergarten, where it's children who have very high needs and are not able to be in a regular classroom. They're in a small program where it is under 10 students in that classroom. I know someone who is now in mainstream college and who is visually impaired and has been going to a school specifically for the blind for many years, graduated from the school, has transitioned to community college, and is having a tough time adjusting to the mainstream system because he's so used to his class sizes being under 10 students and being in an environment where all the students are visually impaired.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
he's going into college, and it's been a massive adjustment for him.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine. So I guess where I'm going is the work that this organization is doing with school districts. Our message to them is that students should not have to be ready in order to be included. The environments need to be ready to accept them and to have them in the class. And that's why we focus on equipping teachers. The teachers and the educators are the ones that should be ready or getting ready to include learners no matter what needs they have, whether it's high support needs or otherwise. And so I guess I was just trying to see where, sometimes what happens is, as educators who are advocating for inclusive education, we are in systems that aren't living up to the ideals that maybe we want, but we keep pushing forward and keep moving forward and hoping to convince and advocate for inclusive education to our leaders.
Absolutely. And I think full inclusion is the goal. I think that is something that still, there's so much work to be done. We are in the process of achieving full inclusion, but I don't think we're there yet. I still think there are a lot of barriers in society that prevent full inclusion from happening. Because as you said, when you think of the phrase, are we ready, right? Will students ever be fully ready to accept and understand others? But I think that also stems from the teachers. Are we ready as teachers to let go of some biases that we may have? Are we ready to open up and be willing to have a classroom where where multiple needs are welcome? Because I think that the first thing that educators rely on is, is my classroom, how can I welcome students in with high needs without adequate support? Because if the support is not in place, I think then you have this juggling act of teacher stress versus the hopeful outcome of full inclusion.
Yes, and I think that a lot of people would agree with that statement. It's like, how can we expect a successful and authentic inclusive practices when learners aren't supported? Because just putting students with disabilities in with students without disabilities, it doesn't make it inclusion. That's just presence. We're just talking about kids being near each other, but it doesn't have anything to do with how we're actually supporting them.
And I think that I don't know myself, as you were saying, the system in the States and the system in Canada may be different, but I know teachers nowadays, there's so much paperwork, there's so much on their plates, and do they have the time and the resources and the funding to, you would hope to make things inclusive? Because I know I was recently looking at social media and I saw someone that I know who works in special education, and she was talking about how she and her teaching partner were able to adapt like used toys by putting switches onto them. And I thought, she said, I'm so happy we were able to do this because getting accessible equipment or accessible toys is so expensive. But the fact that you're seeing these kind of examples that educators are working towards having inclusive materials and thinking of it, an example like that of doing it on their own I think is a sign of things to come, and a sign, such a great example of what inclusive learning can look like.
What is your main message to educators? Because the people who listen to the podcast are typically teachers, principals, district administrators, all with the mindset of they're wanting to know more about inclusive education. They're wanting to hear stories of successful inclusion. They're wanting to hear about people who are doing the work of inclusion in the real world. So what is your big message to them?
My big message is normalizing difference empowers everyone. We need to normalize difference. We need to celebrate difference. We need to be able to celebrate the successes of all students. The one quote that I have been hearing repeatedly is by Henry Winkler. I love his quote. No matter how you learn, it doesn't describe how brilliant you are. The way you learn doesn't describe how brilliant you are. For me, that's such an inclusive quote, because for me, somebody who has a learning disability and who has struggled to fit into the system, I think it really, because we do, we judge people on what they look. Unfortunately, there's still societal judgment on what people look like, what their abilities are, what their cultural background is. We need to continue to celebrate and welcome diversity into our classrooms, because that's how we learn from one another. If we're not celebrating by excluding, we are really then sort of neglecting, and that's not what we want.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a time where the school that I was working at was really focusing on diversity and inclusion. And just so you know, I don't know how much you know about my background, but I worked in a couple different school districts. So one in California and one in Georgia, which is about 20 minutes outside of Atlanta, in the suburbs. And the district I was in the school that I was in, we were contemplating a exceptional children's week is kind of like what we were thinking. And I think that we ended up going with celebrating differences or celebrating diversity. I think that the goal was that we wanted to not just make it about disability, but we wanted to make it about no matter how we are different, whether that's disability, right, race, culture, gender, or however, we should be accepting of everyone. We still had segregated classrooms. We still had, disability specific programs, and those things I actively, advocated against. I wanted us to move to a more inclusive system overall. That didn't happen, but I was proud of the work that we did in this one instance. And I think that it got people out of the mindset of like this disability awareness where it's like, okay, let's learn about blind people. And now we're going to learn about people who use wheelchairs. And now we're going to learn about autism, like this segmented society, like disability of the day type of thing. What has been your experience with how either you yourself or the schools that you've been in have helped the school community focus on diversity and inclusion?
When I am very lucky because I work in a school which is predominantly South Asian background. I speak the language that a lot of the children speak. They come from Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, and a lot of the children speak Urdu, and I speak Hindi, which has been such a big help to helping the students who speak that language feel included in the classroom. It's a comfort to them that their educator acknowledges their home language and is able to have that communication with them.
Yeah, that's great. It makes sense that whoever is going to your school, right, your neighborhood and your context and the culture that is built up, that's a strength, and that you should lean into that and invest in relationships and making sure that the people that are in that neighborhood feel like that community and school is accessible to them, right? Whether that is academically, but also socially and culturally.
Absolutely. And I think that that's very important because I work in a school where a lot of the families don't speak English. Being able to include them by speaking their language, I feel is of real value. And that's why I've been at this school now for 12 years because of that significant cultural connection. And I think when I look back in terms of my own experience with inclusion, I think what I'm doing now as a disability advocate by sharing my experiences, I want people to be able to take from my posts on social media or my videos or podcasts like this, that people with disabilities, people who are, for example, I'm a woman, I am South Asian background, I also have a disability, but I belong, I do have a voice, I have something to say, and I use my strength, which is my speaking voice. That's part of my disability. It's challenging with spatial awareness, but being able to speak and being able to use my voice is such an important step in showing that, that we breaking down cultural barriers, and that, even people who were, like I said, from a visible minority background and also who have a disability, that we matter as much as everyone else.
Is there a story that comes to mind from your experience as a teacher and an advocate of either an educator, a system, or a community embracing inclusion with one of your students or maybe one of your colleagues? What's a story that comes to mind?
I think I've been able to definitely relate to the students who have disabilities in the classroom. I feel like I have a strong connection with them because I want to definitely make sure that they are a part of the classroom. I will go up to them. I will talk with them. I will take the extra time to get to know them. In terms of a story of inclusion, I felt like one of the things that I found in growing up with a disability is that as you get older, or as you start to, for me, interacting with adults there was always a comfort with that. I always felt included with adults. I always struggled with including myself with other children my age, or even in junior high and high school, other students my age. But I feel like from university onwards, I felt like that's when I started to be able to really build my connection with other people socially and emotionally, and I feel more of the sense of belonging.
Okay, before we get to the mystery question, is there anything else that you want to make sure educators take away from this conversation?
I really think that we need to normalize difference. We also need to watch the ways we talk to students or about students. Because I think the way that we talk to students with disabilities, we have to watch the way that we talk to them because that's part of inclusion. We want to make sure that we are talking to them as we would talk to other students. Unless there is a specific diagnosed need, students should all be spoken to in exactly the same way.
Great recommendations for educators as we are all trying to figure out how to make our classrooms and schools more inclusive. Okay, Nisha, how we typically end our interviews is a mystery question. So I have a stack of cards. They're just prompt cards, just conversation starters. And I'm going to pick one and we'll both answer it. Does that sound okay to you?
That's great.
Okay, so here we go. This is a funny one. All right, so what is something weird you do before bedtime? Weird is a relative term, so it's totally up to you on how much you want to share. But what's something weird? I don't know. Okay, well, I'll go first.
Okay.
If that's okay, so you can have a little bit more time to think. I don't know if it's weird, but I've been drinking tea before bed. I haven't quite finished it, even though it's, close to evening time. So I drink a lot of hot beverages, and I used to drink coffee through the evening, even up until bedtime. And then I started switching over to like lavender tea, chamomile, peppermint, kind of more herbal, no caffeine tea. And I've even gotten into drinking this. I'm not going to say the brand name or anything, but it's like it has like, is it melatonin? Yeah, melatonin. Yeah, it has some melatonin. And whenever I drink that tea, I actually don't have trouble falling asleep, but the quality of sleep is actually a lot deeper, and I have some really strange dreams. They're not bad. They're just like intense sometimes when I drink the tea. So I don't do it all the time, but when I do drink the tea, I am always like, oh, I had a weird dream. It's probably the tea. So, what about you?
I think like talking about beverages, it's funny. If I haven't finished my water quota for the day, I will do it right before I go to bed. And that is the worst possible thing.
Yeah. I know. I feel that with the tea too.
Because then you're like, why am I getting up midnight to go to the bathroom? Or I would just want to go to sleep.
That's why I don't drink like a really big beverage. It's just like a small cup of tea before bed. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Nisha. And I'm going to sign us off, but don't go anywhere as it uploads. Nisha Batra, thank you so much for being on the Think Inclusive podcast. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much again for having me. And if anyone would like to follow me, I'm on Instagram. My Instagram handle is @TheSwanTransformation. The reason why that name was chosen, when I was in grade 2, my teacher told my mom that my journey reminded her the story of the ugly duckling, that I would start out with challenges and struggles, but that the journey was a process of transformation. And here I am. And I'm looking forward to connecting with anyone interested.
Fantastic. Yeah. So if you enjoyed this conversation, please make sure to reach out to Nisha on socials. That's all the time we have for this episode of Think Inclusive. Now, let's roll the credits. Think Inclusive is brought to you by me, Tim Villegas. I handle the writing, editing, design, mixing, and mastering. This podcast is a proud production of the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education. Our original music is by Miles Credich, with additional tunes by Melody. A big shout out to our sponsor, IXL. Check them out at ixl.com/inclusive. We truly appreciate each and every one of you who tunes in. We'd love to hear how you're using our episodes. Are they part of your teaching toolkit? Are you sharing them with your school administrators? Drop me a line at tvillegas@mcie.org and let me know. And hey, if you're still with us this far into the episode, it probably means you love Think Inclusive and the work MCIE is doing. Can I ask you a small favor? Help us keep the momentum going by donating at our website, mcie.org. Just click the button at the top of the site and chip in $5, $10, $20. It would mean the world to us and the children in the schools and districts we partner with. Thanks for your time and attention, and remember, inclusion always works. From MCIE.